In this tutorial, we will talk about how to tell if you have a scholarly article. Scholarly articles are one of the most common sources used in academia, and it is very likely that you will need to find and use some over the course of your studies. There are several characteristics to look out for when searching for a scholarly article. The first is to look at who the author is. By this point, you should know if the author is credible and an expert in the field. Scholarly articles are written by field experts and often offer information about an author's credentials. So if you have an article about geology, look for information about the author's credentials, either in the database's record or in the article itself. The next two characteristics is the source's length and the graphics used. Popular sources tend to be shorter, and they have a lot of colorful images and photos that are designed more to draw the eye and entertain than to inform. On the other hand, scholarly articles tend to be longer, with many being 10 or more pages, and the images they use are mostly graphs and charts, images designed to inform than entertain. Another characteristic to look out for is the language used in the articles. Popular sources are written with a general audience in mind, so they will use easier to understand language and less jargon. Scholarly articles tend to have more specialized language and are more liberal with their use of jargon. Citations and references are two big elements to look out for. Popular sources rarely use in-text citations or scholarly footnotes or endnotes, while such methods are very common in scholarly articles. Another big thing to look out for is a list of references. While some popular articles may have references, in most cases it is only one or two, while many scholarly sources can have pages of references. Also pay attention to the format of the article. Most scholarly articles follow a certain format, usually starting with an abstract, then a review of literature, how the research was conducted, the results of the research, conclusions, etc. If you put two scholarly articles side by side, they will look almost exactly alike in terms of how they are organized, but if you do the same with two popular articles, then you will probably see a lot of differences, sometimes even within the same periodical. Next, while it is common that scholarly journals will have the word journal in the title, that is not an indicator that a resource is scholarly. There are some scholarly journals that do not have journal in the title, as well as popular resources that do include journal in their titles, such as the Ladies' Home Journal. Finally, is the journal peer-reviewed? This step is a bit tricky to figure out, but generally, peer-reviewed sources are scholarly, but the opposite is not always true. Scholarly journals are not always peer-reviewed. If you are required to find peer-reviewed sources, it is best to check with library staff or your instructor to see what is considered peer-reviewed and for help finding peer-reviewed resources. Now let's take a look at an example of a scholarly article. Here we are in Academic Search Complete. Now let's say you are doing your paper on immigrants in Ohio. So why don't we go ahead and run a search for Ohio and immigrant with a truncation mark at the end, so we get both immigrant and immigrants. And let's take a look at our results. This one looks good. Immigration and Economic Restructuring in Ohio Cities, 1940 to 2000. Let's click on it and take a look at the record. Now, as you can see, this article was published in the Ohio Journal of Science. As I mentioned earlier, just because it says journal in the title doesn't necessarily mean it is a scholarly periodical. It also lists footnotes after the author's names. While we take a look down here under author affiliations, and it says that they are part of the Department of Geography at Bowling Green State University. Now, we aren't sure if by affiliated with the Department of Geography that they are professors or graduate students. But since we both know both the name and where they are affiliated with, we can go to that website and double check for ourselves. So why don't we go ahead and take a look at the article itself. Now the first thing that should jump out at you is the abstract. This is a hallmark of scholarly articles. That does not mean that all scholarly articles have abstracts or all articles that have abstracts are scholarly articles, but the scholarly articles usually have one. So why don't we just keep taking a look just to be sure. And as you can see, it is laid out, very organized, 2 columns. And here is a graphic, a table, and as you can see, it is a very sparse graphic. There is no color or images. It is just information organized into a table. The 2-column format continues with another table. And as you may notice, there is no ads. Popular articles tend to have ads even in the middle of a specific story. So you might be halfway through one story and there will be an ad for something. But in scholarly articles and journals, ads do not appear in the middle. Very rarely will they ever. And as you can see here on this page, we have our list of references. I would go ahead and say that this is probably a scholarly article, but I would still want to double check those other criteria, including the language as well as the author's affiliations, to see if they are actually experts. In the next tutorial, we will talk about coverage.